The pharmacist was pleased to see that his internet date was an attractive woman, in her early 30s as advertised, but the first meeting did not go so terribly well. She seemed distracted, rushed, and their topics of conversation were not terribly exciting. He found himself talking at great length about his frustration with his job, which he had warned himself against. When they parted, it was with a simple handshake, and no commitment to see each other again. That was okay, he thought. Their senses of humor didn't really match up, and her taste in music was way over his head. He thought about trying again, but he didn't feel confident about it, and he didn't want to make a fool of himself. He was surprised to hear from her again a week later. She idly asked if he wanted to go out for Ethiopian food, and he said yes. Their second date was as bumpy as the first. He thought she came off as somewhat self-absorbed, answering a cell phone call from a friend in the middle of dinner, talking entirely about herself and how irritated she got with the idiots of the world, how money was always so tight, how the service at the restaurant was so poor. After dessert, she said she was tired, and he walked her to her car. Feeling he had nothing to lose, he kissed her on the cheek, to no response but a distracted wave. She drove off, and he felt terrible, inadequate. And yet a few days later he got a message. She was going to see the new Modigliani exhibit, and wanted to know if he had any interest in going too. She was a half hour late, having stopped at a tattoo salon to look into getting one sometime. They walked through the gallery mostly in silence. He offered an observation here and there, a little joke sometimes, and she mostly just nodded or said something very brief in return. They spent some time in the gift shop, so she could buy a gift for her landlord. They talked for a while, and then she said she had some errands to do. They waved at each other, and headed in their separate directions. He didn't know what to make of things. Another dinner followed at her suggestion. It was very brief. She had just gotten off work and insisted she looked terrible. They talked about current events, though she refused to talk about politics. They shared a laugh over a bad movie they had just seen, independently of each other. She declined dessert, said she had to get up early. For the fourth time, neither of them proposed another meeting, and for the fourth time there was a cool, somewhat awkward parting. He replayed the scene over and over again in his mind later on, wondering what he could have done differently, what he could do to make her a little happier. But in the end, he knew the best thing to do was to let it go, consider the experiment a failure, withdraw. 2 weeks went by, and the pharmacist figured she was finally gone. Then, one Wednesday night, he answered the phone, and it was her. She had gotten stuck at the subway stop closest to his house without enough money to head back in the opposite direction. Would he mind popping out and lending her just $2? He said he didn't mind at all. He went into the station, gave her the money. She laughed, apologized, thanked him, said see you later, and boarded the next train. He thought he missed a call from her a month later, but he realized he was mistaken. It was someone else. There was no more contact. He got up the nerve to send her a simple hello email, but she didn't respond to it. For some reason he felt he wanted to delete the very few emails she had sent to him, so he did so. After that, he decided to give up internet dating, and he spent more and more time in his apartment. Just didn't feel much like meeting anyone new. Time went by, and somehow it became 4 years since he'd seen that woman. He thought about her sometimes, with a sadness he couldn't explain. He felt he should not forget her. She was part of his history, his collection of memories of his life on Earth. He wondered if 4 awkward dates and a late-night meeting at the subway station were enough to consider himself part of her long story as well. If she would be mad if he tried to seek her out, just to ask her who she had really been, why she had seemed so angry, and what she had sought from him that she never got. He wanted to say to her, "We were a part of each other's lives. Don't you see? We were. It's true. It doesn't matter that we never kissed, that nothing worked between us, that you were a complete mystery to me, someone I'm not even sure I could even truly like as a friend. We came together, we shared time. I thought about you, you must have thought about me. Please, come back just so I can ask you what you wanted. And if there had been a chance ever that if I had done things differently, we could have connected in some way." Another winter came. He was out at night on the pier where people walked and dined beside the river, and he looked over and he saw her. She was sitting on a bench. She had tears in her eyes as she read and reread a letter she held in her hand. As he watched, she very slowly tore the letter into very small pieces. Alone again in the world, she dabbed her eyes and stared out over the dark water. "So we've both lost years," the pharmacist thought. He watched her for a time, and then, before she saw someone she didn't want to, he walked back home.